precious cross, that's where the fountain is flowing so freely. It's free to everyone that looks to the Lord. I can see that it's flowing from Mount Calvary. Jesus, Jesus, keep me near to the precious cross, that's where the fountain is flowing so freely. It's free to everyone that looks to the Lord. I can see that it's flowing from Mount Calvary. In the cross, be my glory ever. With my rapture, so thou find peace and rest. You can find it with Jesus on the far river shore. Yes, my Lord. Holy Mother, grant us peace. Holy Father, grant us peace. Holy Mother, grant us peace. Holy Father, 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 grant us peace.
I walk all the way to the gate.
I just checked the location.
She's fine. That's why you got it.
He's really
Are we all invited? Are we all invited?
Yep.
Oh, I was talking about what you were talking about, but,
I was making sure I had the birthdays for all our military
oh, okay. That's good.
service projects.
A service project. That's good.
So you're invited to the service project.
I am invited to the service project. Glad to have y'all with us tonight. Glad Ron's feeling better, able to be back with us. And Sylvia Mask has been moved down to a downsized room. I think it's 80/20. I have it written on my desk, so don't. If you want to know, I can tell you, but I can't remember it for certain. But she's hoping to be able to go to a rehab facility in a few days, and to be able to start back her bodily movements, being able to walk and things of that kind. So keep her in your prayers. How many of you have sent me a gift card today? Did you? Oh, okay. You won't get a refund, and it didn't come to me. So if that's what happened. But it's getting crazy, isn't it?
Do you know how that happened?
All we know is that they picked up my number through Faulkner University. And the phone number for the individual who called is, I think, Arkansas, 501. But it was traced back that somehow, and I don't know how they got it at Faulkner. I never was a student at Faulkner, but that's where it seems to have been picked up, is there. It's not the first time it's happened to me. I had a text one time from, I think it was Larry, who said, Dwayne, I'm in trouble. I need some help. The car's broken down. We're in Spain. Please send me so much money. So I called Larry and I said, so you're in Spain, huh? What? What are you talking about in Spain? So, but you always need to check those things out because it is something you really we all have to really be careful of. And some of them are getting so good, especially with the text and email messages. They're getting where they sound so legitimate. And I've gotten to where if there's any question whatsoever, boom, if I don't know anything about it, it's gone. And all of us need to be that way.
Get one from Kenneth, you know it's fake. He is not out of town.
Oh, I thought you meant he wasn't on computer. Okay.
Rarely out of town.
Any other prayer requests? Yes.
My neighbor fell off of his roof on Saturday. Broke 10 ribs. His lung is collapsed. They're doing surgery on his ribs now to put something in there to help hold them. 3 hand surgeries, elbow, arm surgery. He's just lucky, very lucky that it wasn't any worse. But his name's Matt.
Okay. Somebody else?
Kathy Waddell has a very severe UTI. And she's on antibiotics, and they're sending off the specimen to make sure they...
Okay. Good. Yes.
My sister, Rhonda Markham in Winfield, had a stroke yesterday morning and was airlifted to the hospital in Tupelo, Mississippi. And they still don't know the full extent, but she's not really being responsive yet.
My cousin Paul Brown in Mount Airy, Georgia, he was moved to hospice today. He's got cancer really bad, and so it's not to pray for him this time.
You know what type cancer?
He didn't tell you.
Okay.
It's out. He hadn't had it long. He's moved quickly.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember my father, he's got throat cancer and starts radiation, goes to see the radiation doctor Friday, and that's where my sister and I both previously went, so we're familiar with the facility, and just pray that that's going to work.
Okay.
That he will keep up his spirits and keep up his health as well.
Okay. Hey, so he decided to go ahead with the
Yes,
with
we
it?
left that decision up to him, and he said he was not ready to go.
Okay.
He knows God, but, I mean, if it was to happen, but he's ready to fight.
Okay. Okay, let's bow together. Our Father and our God in heaven, we're so grateful that we can come before you to know that you already know everything that we've requested and been asked to bring before your throne tonight. And we just ask you to be with each and every one of those that have been talked about and mentioned, and help every one of them to be able to recover and to be able to go back to normal health if at all possible. And we ask you, Father, to be with every single one of us and bless us as we go through our night tonight in our class. Help us to open our minds to your word, and help us to be faithful to you and be with us through the rest of our week this week. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.
Y'all haven't found any glasses, have you?
Sunglasses?
No, just eyeglasses.
Okay, there's a pair of sunglasses on the podium, but if anybody finds something, normally go to the coat rack in the other foyer.
Oh, okay.
In that coat rack area, look up on the shelf, and generally speaking, if somebody finds something, they'll either put it on the pulpit podium or in that coat rack. And if not, then if you see Lou Powell, ask Lou Powell. Because Lou's, well, she's not always the one doing it, but Lou's the one that has been doing quite regularly the cards. And so she usually finds things and brings it to the office or puts it up there. So you can try those. If you weren't aware of that, that's something always good to remember, where those things take place. We're going to back up before we get into tonight's Fruit of the Spirit. We'll be talking about kindness tonight, but we're going to take a step back. And the reason I want to do it, this is something we probably need to do with every single one of them, but I wanted to remind you of it tonight because we go through a study like we did last week on patience, and we talk about patience and what it is and what it means, and sometimes it gets to be kind of overwhelming what all is involved in being a person that is patient. And I just wanted us to remember that with everything that the Bible talks about, there is a balance to it. There is a side for what we are to do, and then there's a side where we can see for ourselves exactly how Christ lived and exactly what he did. And so before we start talking about kindness tonight, and this is going to be another one.
So before we start talking about kindness tonight, and this is going to be another one.
Betty and I can't make it go off. I got it.
If I could only count the times people wish they could turn me off. That happens a lot. I'm glad that you were able to do it. All right. So we'll go back to patience, and we want to think back on it. Remember, the idea of patience is from a term that is used in the Bible, and it means long-tempered. And being long-tempered doesn't mean no temper. Did Jesus ever have a temper? Did he ever get angry? Did he ever look at them and let them know, I'm not real happy with you right now? Yes, he did. But long-tempered means that you don't get there real quick. You back off a little bit, you try to understand, you try to be patient, you try to do those things, and long-tempered doesn't mean you never get angry. It doesn't mean you never lose patience with what somebody's doing and those kind of things. But that brings up a question. And to kind of fill in with what we were talking about last week, Jesus did show temper. He did that on a number of occasions. He did it with his apostles. He did it with those that he was trying to teach. He did it with another group of individuals. He was angry at times. But the question I want you to think with me about for just a second is, What differences do you see in his anger and ours?
This was a righteous anger. Ours often is not.
What's the difference between a righteous and an unrighteous anger?
Selfless maybe and we're selfish.
His was justified.
His was justified,
Controlled.
controlled. Did it turn to hate?
No.
Would he have still forgiven? Did he still desire for them to have life with him forever? No matter how upset he was, and he was willing to forgive, he was still willing to accept. If repentance was there, he wouldn't accept what they were doing. But he would accept them if there was change, if they would come to him. He would absolutely do that. But even if they wouldn't, he would still seek what was best for them. He would still want what was best for them. No matter how frustrated he might become at them or with them. And you can see that with regard to his apostles. He could get so angry at Peter and then turn around and talk with him and tell him, this is what's going to happen, here's what you're going to do, and here's what you need to do. And encourage him all along the same way. That's hard. So I just wanted us to know, understand and know that patience doesn't mean you never get angry or you never lose temper or have temper. You sometimes have temper that arises, and sometimes that temper is expressed, and it's not necessarily wrong that it is.
Would the better kind of temper always be along with love and the other kind of hate? Would if we're bad and angry?
I think the idea of love there would mean seeking the best for. I'm saying this, for your own good. I'm telling you this because this is something important you need to change.
Like with your child.
Like with your child. Like you would do that with your child. You get so frustrated with your child because what you're doing cannot be tolerated, will not be accepted, and will not go unpunished. But you've got to wake up to this and change. And that's what Jesus would be doing.
His anger was always directed at a specific thing. Sometimes when we get angry, it just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah. I tell you what I do. I don't need to tell y'all all of this about me, but I call it collecting stamps. Y'all remember when you had the green stamps and you'd put them in a thing and you collect them all up. And sometimes when we get angry, we will let it go. We'll just ignore it. But we haven't forgotten it, and it's put in my little stamp book. And it's saved. And then something else happens and we get angry again, and if you're like me, you become a little pouty and you become a pouter and you don't say anything, but you put stamps back there. You may put about 12 back there for that. And then all of a sudden it comes up, something really happens, and then all of the stamps boom, come pouring out. And that's not Jesus at all. That's not him at all, nor at all the way he would have us to be with regard to our anger. Are y'all exploding back there? Are you? Okay.
I'm more like the gasoline, you keep pouring, and then it overflows.
And then it overflows.
The fire.
There's not a lot of difference between that and the stamps. Stamps just sounds a lot gentler. Gasoline sounds much deadlier. Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, we're going to look at kindness. And we're going to start off with what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13 when he's describing love. And these two fit together so well. I want you to notice how he starts off. Love is. And after he goes from love is, he goes to love does not. And he does that for several verses. And then he comes back to what love will do. and that it rejoices in the truth, it bears all things, it hopes all things, it endures all things. He goes through all of that. But when he says this first line, love is patient and kind. That's what love is. And those are the two fruit of the spirits that we've been talking about, patience and kindness. And patient is the one that we described it last week as this is Monday morning activity when you're no longer in church and you find out how you really live your life. Kindness is not so much there, but kindness is something that's very pleasurable. And it's very rewarding when we do things that are kind toward other people. At least it can be very rewarding. And love is patient and love is kind. It does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. There's a lot of universals there. And sometimes you get into trouble if you believe all things. Like, for instance, that Dwayne has a gift card he wants you to send to him. There's some things that you need to investigate. Love never ends. For prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. But love never ends. It's the one that lasts and lasts even into eternity. And all of those things are there. Hope, faith, and love. Of those three, only one stays in eternity, and that's love. Faith goes away because we now see it. We will now have it. Hope goes away because we no longer hope for it. We now have it. It's a reality. And that would be the reality. That will be the reality in heaven. Kindness. You tell me, without looking at it, just from your perspective, give me some definitions of what it means to be kind. Some other words that might be synonyms to it, but when you think about kindness, what comes to your mind?
Doing something for somebody and not expecting anything in return.
Yeah, that's good.
Welcoming a stranger.
Welcoming a stranger. Well,
You have a lot of kind people here.
Considering others before you consider yourself.
yeah. Put others first.
Showing love towards someone.
Showing love towards them. Yeah.
Overlooking imperfections in others.
Yeah. Yeah, she was talking about you there.
She tried not to look. Having compassion.
Having compassion. Being kind toward others. Thoughtful of others. I put these up. Y'all mentioned several of them. Being thoughtful for others more than for yourself. Serving others by helping. Encouraging others. Comforting others. Doing something that benefits somebody else. And generosity. All of those things are there, and every single one of those things are, bottom line, what Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. That is kindness, which is what we are to be like. There's a Hebrew word that's used a lot in the book of Hebrews. It also has the same kind of word, although it's not a Hebrew word in the Greek language. It's hesed. And it's used so many times throughout the Old Testament that you can't read them all. But I wanted us to look at a definition of it, and we're going to look at the definition by looking at some places where it's used. And we're only going to look at two passages, and both of them are in the book of Psalms. And the first one that we're going to look at is Psalm 23, which all of us are familiar with. And by now, after our study on Psalms, we may be familiar with all of them now. But in the book of Psalms, chapter 23, I want you to read with me, or somebody can read for me, verse 6.
Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Okay. The word, hasid, is the fourth word in the verse. Now, your translation said mercy. What did your translate? Love. Love. Okay, mine says mercy. That's what I'm looking at. What did the other translations say? Anybody have a New American Standard? Mercy is the one most often used. New American Standard says loving kindness. It says loving kindness. That's this word, loving kindness, mercy, love. It's the same word, but it's used or translated in different ways. And you'll find that word used all through the Bible, but it'll be translated according to your particular translation. The next one I want you to go to with me is Psalm 136. And Psalm 136 is near the end. It's one of those unusual verses, and it's very good to look at. And we're not going to read all of the verses, but what I want you to do is just to scan down it and look at how every single verse ends. My translation, which is the English Standard Version, will say, His steadfast love endures forever. His steadfast love is this word, hasid. What other translations do you have?
Loving kindness.
Loving kindness. What did you have?
Loyal love.
Loyal love. Loyal love, steadfast love.
Mercy endures forever.
His mercy endures forever. All of those are different English words that can translate this word. And Psalm 136 is an interesting psalm because it goes through a whole listing of things that God has done for us as human beings, but every single one of them ends with His loving kindness. All of the things that we have, all the things that He's done for us, and now we add to it the coming of Jesus, Jesus' death on the cross, our forgiveness of sins. Every single thing is because of His loving kindness. And that's what He is toward each and every one of us. Now, let's think about some. I want you to tell me the stories. I think you'll be familiar with all of them. But we're going to look at some examples of kindness. And the first one we want to look at, and I put them in this order: Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. And you recognize them from the book of Ruth, and you recognize them as being the three main characters. And what I want us to think about is each of them individually and what they did in order to show kindness. And the first one that I want us to focus on is Naomi. Now, we pick up the story, and when we get to the heart of the story, Naomi's heart is full of anger, bitterness, I know for sure sadness, but bitterness even when she comes back home. She doesn't even want her name to be recognized about anything that's joyful because of her brokenheartedness that she has. But in spite of that brokenheartedness, what does she do? This will be in the first part of the story. if you need to go back to the book of Ruth and take a look and just scan down, what does she do? Tells them to go back to her parents. Why does she do that?
Thinking of them.
Yeah, so they can have a life, so they can have children. She can't have another son to be able to give them an opportunity to marry again. So she tells them to go back. And she pleads with them and begs them. One of them does, and one of them doesn't. And that's when that line that's so often used in marriages comes into play. When Naomi is talking to Ruth, and Ruth says, what? Yeah. That's right. Look at what she's saying. Why is she saying it? Why does she say, your God will be my God, and your people will be my people? Why is she saying that? Has she seen something? Has she seen a difference in the gods that she's worshipped and the God that Naomi's worshiping? And the God that directs the life, or the gods that direct the life, so to speak, of her people, and the God that directs the life of Naomi? I think both of them may have seen that, but Ruth to a much deeper extent. And I think that's why she says that. Your God will be my God, and your people will be my people. She is turning her back on the people where she was born, going with a different life. And I think she sees that it will be a better life because of who she's with. Is it just that? Or does she have that much love for her Naomi she can't stand for her to be alone? And that could be a part of it. That could be a part of what she does. So she comes with her. And then we are introduced to Boaz. And what about Boaz?
Protected her.
Huh?
Protected her.
Protected her. What did he do with the grain? What did he tell his men? Leave some. And not just leave some, pull some out and put it for her and make sure she gets it. And when she comes home, Naomi cannot believe how much she has gathered. I forgot what the total amount is, but it's a bunch of grain that she's able to bring home to Naomi. And because this man has watched after her, and Naomi wants to know who was this man. And when she tells him who it was, Naomi rejoices because, why? It's not just Boaz. What about him? He's a kinsman redeemer, which means what?
He's
Next of kin. The husband dies, he takes the wife to raise a child for the deceased husband. And that's who he is. And Naomi knows that. And she tells Ruth, he's a kinsman redeemer. He can redeem us. He can redeem us in this whole situation. So she tells Naomi what to do. And what does she tell Naomi to do? Find out where he's sleeping. Lay down at his feet and cover his feet with your robe, with your robe. What is that? It's an invitation to marriage. And when he wakes up, he doesn't kick her away from him and run her away. She tells him, you are a kinsman redeemer. And he says to her, blessed are you. Because what you're doing now is better than anything you've done before. Toward Naomi and toward the whole situation. But he says, we have one issue. There's a kinsman redeemer closer than me. So I will go and talk with him. And if he will take you, then he will take you. But if he doesn't, then I will. And so he goes and talks to that kinsman redeemer. The other kinsman redeemer doesn't want to have anything to do with it. When he finds out the land would go to him, he's all for the land. But along with the land comes Ruth. And then he says, then I can't do it. Do you remember why?
It endangers
It endangered his own inheritance. So that adds a little bit more to what Boaz is going through. And he is not willing to endanger his inheritance. And he says, I can't do it, you do it. And so Boaz is able to come back with the news, and they marry. And they have a child, yes.
But Dwayne, when he first found out who she was, he talked about her kindness
Yeah.
to Naomi.
Yeah. He already knew about her kindness to Naomi and how kind Naomi was. And now, what did she not do that so impressed him?
Go after younger men.
Go after younger men. She didn't go after somebody younger. She didn't go after somebody possibly her own age. She went after an older man because he was a kinsman redeemer, and it meant something important to the family. And it would mean something important for the family going forward. And so Boaz was willing to do that. And that's why this whole story, this love story, is such an overwhelming thing, because every single one of them sacrificed for each other. Every single one of them gave up things for each other and created this family. So they have a child. That child has a child. That child that has a child has another child. So we come down to son, grandson, and great-grandson. And who's the great-grandson? David. And there's the line coming from Abraham, and the line coming from the tribe of Judah, and the line coming right into David, and then coming right on down because of this story. When did this book take place? What was the historical surrounding of this book of Ruth? The Judges. So what do these three people tell you about the time of the Judges?
Or at least some faithful.
There were at least some faithful. Maybe not everybody, but here's a family that is. No matter what else is going on in the book of Judges. You remember the book of Judges, it got so bad. God was bringing in nations to destroy them. And here this family. And from this family is going to come the man after God's own heart. Can you understand why? Can you understand the stock from which he came? Can you understand the nursing, the teaching that Naomi gave to the son? And the nursing and the teaching that Ruth and Boaz gave to not only the son, but then to the grandson. And having all that nurturing and teaching from that going all the way to the great-grandson, a man after God's own heart, the sweet psalmist of Israel. And not a perfect person, not a perfect man, none of us are, but that's kindness. And that's exactly what these people did. Going to have to hustle. David, Jonathan, and Mephibosheth. You can look up the verses if you like. 1 Samuel 20, 14 through 17, 2 Samuel 16, 1 through 4, then 19, 24 through 30. There's a reason why I put those up. The first one, 1 Samuel 20, 14 through 17, is when Jonathan becomes convinced that his father does actually want to kill David, and that his father has been hiding it from him. And he doesn't believe David when David first tells him, but he goes back for the feast day and David is not there, and he learns that his father hates David and has every intention of killing him. So Jonathan will come out, 1 Samuel 20, 14 through 17, and he tells David that he's right. And the Bible will tell us that David weeps more than Jonathan. Both of their hearts are broken. Maybe Jonathan is not weeping as much because of the anger and the frustration that he may have toward his dad. David knows what's coming and what's ahead, and his heart is broken. But Jonathan asked David for a favor. Now you look at this. Who was to be the next king? Jonathan. And he looks at his best friend, the man who will be the next king in his place. And he says to him, when you come to your throne, don't forget me. And then he says, when you come to your throne, don't forget my family. And David swears an oath to him. I will never forget you, and I will never forget your family. David becomes king. He's ruling. We come to 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. And David's sitting on his throne, and he calls in some people. He calls in a servant of Saul's because he's got a question. And the question that he has is there anybody left of Saul's house so that I can show kindness to Jonathan? And they call in the servant of Saul, and he says, oh, yeah, there is. There is a child of Jonathan's who, when Jonathan and his family, when they were all fleeing from the palace during the fighting, he fell and became lame. He's lame from his feet. He knew where he was, knew what house he was staying in, knew how to get in touch with him. And David said, go get him. And so he came. Do you remember what David did for Mephibosheth? Do you remember what he said? He called the servant back in along with Mephibosheth when he came. And all of the land of Saul went to who? Mephibosheth. And what was the servant to do? Take care of it and work the land for him. And bring him food from it every day. But he really doesn't need the food, because where's Mephibosheth going to eat? The king's table for the rest of his life. He will eat at the king's table because David made a promise to his friend Jonathan, who's now been dead for some time. And he's keeping that promise. He doesn't forget it. And he's bringing Mephibosheth into the house in order for that to occur. 1924, David is having to flee because of Absalom. Absalom is coming to take over the palace. David knows it, and he and the army are fleeing. They're crossing Jordan. As he's crossing Jordan, the servant comes with donkeys and food and wine and all the supplies that the people that are in David's party could use for the journey that they were taking. And David looks at him and says, I see what you've brought and we're grateful for it, but where is your master? And what does the servant tell him? He's in Jerusalem, because he says, now Saul's kingdom will be returned to me. Now I can have the kingdom back that really belongs to my family. David then said to the servant, the land that belonged to him now belongs to you. David goes. The battle against Absalom is over. Absalom is dead. He comes back, 1924 through 30. One of the first ones to meet him as he's beginning to cross the Jordan River is Mephibosheth. And he says to Mephibosheth, why didn't you come? What does Mephibosheth say? Do you remember?
He had no way to go. His servant lied.
His servant lied to him. I told him to saddle my donkey. I told him to saddle the donkey because I intended to come with you. But he lied to me, and he didn't saddle the donkey, and he didn't come to get me. The man is lame. He can't walk. And the servant did not allow him, or did not pick him up. And now we have one of these issues. Who's telling the truth? Which one do you believe? I happen to believe Mephibosheth. But David is smarter than me. He has no idea which one's telling the truth. And he's not going to pretend to take sides. So what does he do with the land? Divides it between them. It'll belong to both of you now. That's what you're going to do. And Mephibosheth continues to live in David's house and has all the things that were there. You see kindness there. With all of this, with David running for his life, with all the brokenheartedness about his own son wanting to kill him, with all the brokenheartedness about his son's death, so much so that David can't rejoice for the victory until one of his generals comes to him and says, the people are going to leave you because they have given you a great victory and you're not allowing the people to celebrate. And finally he wakes David up so that he does go outside. But all this sorrow and stuff being poured on him, look at who he still thinks about. And look at who he still takes care of. Even when he's not sure where the truth is. And who's being absolutely honest with him and who isn't. David came from Naomi and Ruth. And David knew some things about kindness. And he knew some things about putting others ahead of yourself. And he does that here with this. We can go forever on this, so I'll just put the name up. Jesus. What kindness has he shown?
Salvation.
Salvation. The forgiveness of every sin you've committed against whom?
God.
God. Every sin you've committed against him. And he has given us the forgiveness of all those sins by his death. It took his death to have a sacrifice perfect enough, pure enough, to be able to wash away the sins of humanity. And that's his kindness. His kindness to us. That every sin is forgiveness. Kindness is the fruit of the Spirit. You don't get it by saying, okay, I'm going to do this, because you'll fall flat on your face. You do this by being filled with God's Spirit. You do this by striving to be what God would have you to be. How do I do that? How do you and I do that? Open your Bibles to the book of Colossians. In the book of Colossians, I don't really know where I want to start reading and where I want to stop reading. But we're going to look. Let's just do the two verses. We'll start in chapter 3 with the first one. We'll start at verse 16. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 16. The Bible will tell us this. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And now listen to the verse. And whatever you do, in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus. I put up the word imitate. Be like him. Whatever I do in word or deed, do it like Christ would do it. Imitate him. That applies to the work we do. That applies to our relationships with others. It applies with every single thing. Now the second verse drops down a little bit to verse 23. In verse 23, the Bible will tell us this. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. So in the first one, whatever you do, do it like Christ would do it. The second one, whatever you do it for Christ. Do it as if you were doing it to him. Do it for Christ. When we look at those two things together, the idea that we need to have in mind in order to show kindness is whenever we're looking at an individual and we're thinking, what can I do to help this person? What would Christ do? Or what would I do if that were Christ? Oh, what would I do and what would Christ want me to do with regard to these people? Now, all of that comes down to Matthew chapter 25. I'm going to read it to you. You can follow along with me. But Matthew chapter 25, see if it doesn't just sum up what's been said in these two passages that Paul writes to the church at Colossae. In Matthew 25, starting with verse 31, it says this. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people from one another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, that's the sheep, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. So you see why Paul writes what he writes in Colossians. Do what you would do for Jesus. Do what Jesus would have you to do. That's getting us closer and closer to the fruit of the Spirit, because it simply means living like Christ would have us to live. Now, is there a balance here? We know there is, but we have to be careful. We have to use wisdom, and we have to ask ourselves, what would Christ have us to do? Because who do we help? Those that are in need. What does Paul say about the individual who won't work? Don't let him eat. Is the person who refuses to work really in need? By his own making, if he's in need. He just doesn't want to do anything. He wants other people to take care of him. So there's a balance here. And the struggle with us is the balance. And because we can be so overwhelmed with, I'm going to do everything everybody asks me to do. And in essence, what we'd be doing is hurting them. Not helping them to become more of what they ought to be and what they should be. And so there's a balance here, and there's things that we have to watch out as we go through it. And I wanted to go back to get that balance in on patience, and I wanted to mention it here with this one. We have just a couple of seconds. So the last thing I wanted us to think about is this. How do you know when kindness has become a habit? How do you know when patience has become a habit? How do you know when any of the fruit of the spirits has become a habit? And it'll apply to every single one of them. Let me give you a little 4-step thing, and you kind of tell me where they are. And just to think about and to look at. Okay, here they are. Stay with me on the first one. It's become a habit with you when you do it without thinking about it. But is that true of everything? No, there'll be some times when I might not do what I know I ought to do. But in those times when I do what I know I ought to do, and I do it without even thinking about it, then that's become, for me, in that particular situation, a strong and good habit. And I need to keep going. What about the second one? I have a sense of guilt and regret because I didn't do it. Are you growing? Yes. Because you didn't do it when you knew you could have, and now you're convinced you should have, and you have a sense of regret because you didn't do it, that means there's truth there that you feel guilty about that you didn't live by. And so yes, you're growing. You're not all the way up to the top yet, but you're growing. You're getting there. What about, I don't even think about it at all until I'm reminded. Don't even think about doing anything until somebody kind of pricks my conscience, or my own conscience eventually pricks me. I think that's pretty close to the second one. I can still be corrected. I can still be challenged and pay attention to the challenge. The last one, I don't even consider it. And I'm not paying attention to you if you consider it. I don't care. Then I'm not there at all. I just thought of that as kind of a, how do you know when it's a habit? And somebody once told me, anything you can do for 26 days becomes a habit. Maybe I'll lose count somewhere during the days, but I have a lot of things I've tried to make a habit that haven't fallen into place yet. But I kind of think of it like that. What do y'all think about that? Is that about right, you think? Something along that line. Kindness. It comes by striving to be like Him. It comes by trying to walk like Him. That's the only way it can come. Like every one of the things that come to us from the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Christ. We're going to have to double up going forward. I thought we had 4 weeks left. We don't. We only have actually 2 weeks left, because the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, we will not meet on Wednesday night. We'll meet on Tuesday night, and we'll have a singing and devotional period for that night before Thanksgiving weekend. So we've got 2 more classes, and we have 4 more fruits. And so we're going to kind of double up on them the next couple of weeks. And so be ready for that as we go. Thank y'all. Have a great night, and be safe out there, and do not send anybody any cards.